Hi everyone, it's Abby with the Bead Place and beadplace.net, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of these gemstone necklaces. Remember, you can find all the materials in a kit linked below. We're using just a few basic tools. We have a crimping pliers, a jewelry wire cutter, a bead stopper, 2 chain nose pliers, and a tape measure. The materials that we're using are 1 strand of 8mm rounds. So this is a standard 16-inch strand. For my pendant, I'm using a variety of items that will link together. I have a druzy link, a brass backing, and a little metal cast tassel charm. I also have 18 inches of jeweler's wire. We're also going to be using 18 inches of chain. I have a variety of jump rings. I have a lobster clasp, which is optional. We also have a selection of finishing beads and crimp beads that we'll be using. So these are standard 2x2 crimp tubes that we'll be using with our magic crimper tool. All right, so let's start with the fun stuff. I am going to be assembling the pendant that I'm using. Now you can use a ready-made pendant that is exactly the way you want it, but I'm going to take things up a notch by stacking some things together. So I have a druzy link here that I'm going to layer on top of this brass pendant. So in order to do that, what I'm going to need to do is use 2 jump rings to attach these pieces together. Now the reason why I'm using 2 jump rings is because these links are in opposite directions. So if I would just use 1 jump ring to attach them, that means this link would sit sideways. So using 2 allows them to sit flat. So since I'm using 2, I'm going to use teeny tiny little itty bitty jump rings. So these I want to kind of disappear into the background, so I'm using an antiqued brass color. Now when you're opening and closing a jump ring, you always want to make sure to open it sideways like this, instead of pulling it open like this. That way, when you go to close it, it closes exactly right in the correct position and it retains its original shape. Now we'll take the second small jump ring and open that as well. We'll be using this teeny tiny jump ring to attach the pendant bail to the link. So attach the jump ring into the bail of the pendant and then string the jump ring that you attach to the druzy right into that jump ring. Use your pliers to close the jump ring. And voila! Now we'll be attaching the cast tassel charm to the bottom of the druzy link. This time we're going with a larger jump ring. And in order to match the color of the tassel so it kind of blends seamlessly, I'm using a bright gold color. Again, open your jump ring sideways, string it through the bottom of the druzy link, and then string the tassel into the jump ring. Use your pliers to close the jump ring. And now we'll go back in and double check our connections to make sure they're smooth and flush. Yep, looks good. On to the beads. Okay, here's the hard part. Now we have to decide which beads we're going to use with this pendant. What I want you to do, I think this will be fun, I want you to pause the video after you've seen the choices and comment below telling me which one you think you'd use. Would you use the white howlite beads or the black lava beads? Oops, let me straighten that out. So pause the video, comment below what you'd choose, and then of course come back and watch the rest of the video to see how to make the necklace. But don't worry, you can get either one, whichever your favorite is. We'll have kits for both options. Just make sure to check the video description for the links. All right, so the next step is to divide your strand in half. Now you may have 1 bead left over, just save that for another project. You might not. And what we're gonna do is string half of the beads onto our jeweler's wire. Now, if you only learn one thing from today's video, I hope that it is this tip. always use your bead stopper. This is a bead stopper. It is the most important tool in beading. How this works is you squeeze the two ears together and it clasps on your wire. This is a temporary clasp on your wire that stops your beads from falling off the end while you're working. Much better than tape, much stronger. It's removable so you could alter your designs. And then also it has multiple openings for multi-strand projects. So after your bead stopper is firmly placed on the end of your wire, we are going to start stringing. So string half of your beads onto the wire. After half of the beads are strung, the next step is to string the pendant onto our jeweler's wire and carry on stringing the other half of the beads. After stringing the 16 inches of beads, the next step is to place the bead stopper so that it is on both ends of the soft flex wire that we're using, so that none of the beads fall off while we move over to our 18-inch length of chain. Our next step is to divide the chain in half. Now this particular chain that I'm using is really cool because the links actually open like a jump ring to allow you to reuse that link. It doesn't have to be cut. So I'm just going to use my pliers to open this chain and split it in half. So we should then have two 9-inch pieces of chain. Oh, but while this link is open, it would be smart of me to put my clasp into it. Now, if you're working at home and the chain that you're using doesn't open to allow you to attach things directly into it, just use a jump ring to attach your clasp if you decide you want to clasp on your necklace. Our next step is to attach the strands of beads to the ends of the chain. In order to do that, I will remove one of the strands from the bead stopper and to it string a little finishing bead. String a little finishing bead. This bead just allows me to tuck the wire back into something if my beads don't have a big enough hole to kind of accept it and hide it. It's not 100% necessary, but I think it just gives it a more finished look. The next bead that I'm adding is a crimp bead. Now this is a standard 2x2 crimp tube, and that is what works the best with the crimping tool that I'm using and that I recommend. So after we've strung the finishing bead and the crimp bead onto the strand of beads, onto the jeweler's wire, I'm going to then string the last link of the chain onto the jeweler's wire. So string directly through the link just like it's a bead. Now I'm going to take the end of the wire and I'm going to bring it back through the crimp bead. So notice how I'm bringing it back through just that crimp bead. Now if you want at this point you can also string it through the finishing beads and the stone beads if they have a big enough hole to accept the wire. But just so you can kind of get a better idea of what I'm doing, I'm just going to have it through the crimp bead at this point. Now, after it's through the crimp bead, what we're going to do is get rid of all this slack. So my favorite way to get rid of the slack is to hold on to that crimp bead and pull the tail end out, just like that. So that makes that loop nice and tiny. We don't want it so tiny that there's no flexibility here, but just small enough that it kind of just disappears when we're looking at it. So our next step is to crimp. Now, if you look at the inside of this tool, you'll see that there's kind of a bored out hole, like a cavity missing from the tool, and that is actually the area where we crimp. So we're going to lay that crimp bead directly in the center of that kind of bored out area, and it has to sit exactly centered, otherwise it won't make a pretty smooth round ball. So once it's centered, what we're going to do is squeeze all the way down. Now be kind of heavy-handed here, squeeze as hard as you possibly can. And now when I open it, if I squeezed hard enough and if it was perfectly centered, the crimp will look like ravioli. So see how it kind of looks like ravioli? It has pinched corners. It's kind of like a puffed pillow almost if you're not super into food like I am. So we're going to squeeze the sides of the ravioli down now. So turn it sideways and squeeze the sides in. And now we're just going to open, rotate it slightly, squeeze down, open, rotate, and squeeze down. So here's a little bit of a progress shot so far. You can see that it looks pretty round, but we still need to squeeze around just a few more times. So the next step after we've crimped is to hide the tail end. Now, what we can do is either use our jewelry wire cutter to trim this tail end so that it's just long enough to tuck down inside that next finishing bead, or what we can do is push it through the finishing bead completely and into the stone bead if you have a large enough hole in your stones to kind of accommodate the wire going through it twice. So I'm going to try it out, and I'm pretty sure with a big hole like that, it'll work. All right, so now we're moving on to the other side. So we are going to do the same thing. We are stringing the finishing bead, the crimp bead, and we are going to switch to the other side of the chain now. So string the last link of chain onto the jeweler's wire. And now we again are going to take the wire back through the crimp bead just as we did before. But the only difference that we have on this side is that we need to ensure that all the slack is taken out of the necklace itself. So we've pulled all the slack out of the top loop, but now we need to pull all the slack out of the necklace. So what we're going to do is hold the wire at the top here. So this hand right here, we're going to hold the wire at the top, and we are going to use our fingertips or fingernails if you have them, and we're going to slide that crimp down towards the beads. So that pulls all of the slack out of the necklace itself and up into this loop. So now that all the slack is in the loop, we're going to hold the crimp in place and pull this tail end out. And so just work back and forth like that so that all the slack is taken out of the necklace. So one tip that I can share with you is that you want to leave just a little bit of slack in the necklace itself. Chances are you won't be able to get all of the slack out anyway, but you want to leave just a little bit so that your pendant will flow freely and not sit out funny. So after we have gotten it to an amount of slack that you are comfortable with, we are going to again crimp. So we are going to put the crimp bead right in the center of that hollowed out area on the crimping tool, squeeze down, open it, see how it looks like ravioli, turn it to the side, squeeze down again once it's centered, and we are just going to keep rotating and squeezing and rotating and squeezing and working all the way around. So here's a better, closer look. See how they're perfectly round balls. Now on this side, what we could do is push this tail end all the way back down through everything. But just to kind of show you what I'm going to do here is I'm going to trim the tail end and tuck it in. Or if you want to leave your tail end long, you can feed it all the way down into the beads. Totally up to you. And now we have a finished necklace. These necklaces are super fun to get creative with. You can layer pendants together. You can use components and link them together. Like this is one of our art metal component pieces. You can find that in the website, or you can ask for it at your local bead store. You can use donuts or link pieces together within one another. You can use pinch bails like this. So this was a lapis pendant that we used a pinch bail. And so this is just a component that you squeeze together in order to attach it like a jump ring. Or you can just use a plain old ready-made pendant and attach it with a jump ring, and it's as beautiful as the next one. So thank you so much for watching our videos. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed watching, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. It lets us know what kind of content you like to see. And it helps other people see our videos. It makes us show up higher in the search results as something that YouTube thinks other people want to see. So if you really, really liked watching, you can share this video with your friends. Go ahead and like us on Facebook and Instagram. And as always, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And thanks for watching.